right. Very good morning to all of you. And as the session topic, hydrogen as a lever for decarbonization. So, in my presentation, I will be talking about just figuring out the technicalities of this. I believe so too. I need to press the button, right? But yeah. All right. So the overall agenda would be talking about the global hydrogen landscape, hydrogen as a lever for decarbonization in India. Looking at the value chain and how potential can be unlocked, and finally summarizing all of that. So starting with the global hydrogen landscape, well, as we can see clearly, the global demand stood at about 90 million metric tons in 2020. Majority is used for industrial applications, which contributed to about 900 million metric ton of direct CO2 emissions in 2020. So as things stand today, the major users are in refining, as we also heard earlier in the day, also in chemicals and some other applications, part of it being also transportation. And as you all very well know, there's a whole rainbow of hydrogen out there, from black to green, green being the most sustainable one over there. Looking at the International Energy Authority's scenarios on hydrogen demand and supply, we see that if the APS scenario, as we call it, which is the announced pledges, is taken over, then only post 2030 will we see more of a dip in emissions happening. However, if some of the other scenarios like the net zero emissions, which is the NZE, comes into play, then by 2050 we'll see net zero emissions being possible. So all of that does say that no matter which scenario we follow, green hydrogen is going to form an integral part of decarbonization of the globe. Looking at what's happening around the globe, we see that Europe is leading globally in terms of number of announced projects in green hydrogen, and also the targets for electrolyzer installation by 2030. Of course, if we look at the state today, China is leading in terms of producing about 21% of the global green hydrogen. We see that a lot of investment has been committed, as you can see on this slide, as far as Europe is concerned. What's also interesting to see is that there are also fuel cell electric vehicle targets that have been taken by all the regions over here. For example, Europe talking about 500,000 fleet of LCVs and other vehicles, and similarly targets have been taken by the US as well as China. So all in all, we see that the world is moving towards green hydrogen, whether it's in terms of generation of renewable electricity, which we heard in the morning also being a key ingredient of this mix, or we talk about the number of electrolyzers coming in, or targets being taken in terms of even, say, fuel cell electric vehicles. Therefore, if this is what's happening in the globe, what is it that we have to look at for India? Well, India has made the COP26 commitments to cut the total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons by 2030. Also reducing the carbon intensity of the economy by less than 45% by 2030 from the 2005 levels. And also net zero carbon emissions by 2070. All of this is, of course, going to need a lot of renewable energy, and also green hydrogen is going to be an essential part of this mix. And as a result of this, we already see that the government's started moving on this path with India's green hydrogen policy, which talks about things like waiver of interstate transmission charges, open access for sourcing of renewable energy, also sort of SOPs around manufacturing zones for green hydrogen production plants, and also meeting the renewable purchase obligations for any renewable energy that's also consumed for the production of green hydrogen. When we look at the emissions that we've emitted close to 2.9 or about 3 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide in 2021, power and transport sectors being the top emitters, And coupled with that is the fact that in India's crude oil imports have been increasing at almost 11% CAGR over the last 2 decades. So both from a decarbonization perspective as well as an energy security or a forex security perspective, green hydrogen does provide a panacea for these two problems for the country. When we look at the hydrogen demand in India, it could be about 29 million tons by 2050, and usage in green steel and transport is likely to pick up post-2030 and power post-2040. So as you can see on the slide, initially most of the demand is going to come from markets like refinery, ammonia, methanol, which are already using hydrogen as an industrial feedstock and in the chemical processes. And post that, we do see that other sectors are going to also pick up, and the green hydrogen share is going to increase and become about 4 times of current levels in the future, and we're going to see cumulatively large-scale application of green hydrogen in the Indian economy. As a raw material, green hydrogen can be leveraged, as I just spoke earlier, and also as the speakers mentioned earlier, whether it's in industry, which is in refineries, it's in steel, it's in chemicals, also in fertilizers, also in the gas economy, including the city gas distribution networks or the CGD networks, also in transportation, whether it's in the form of a fuel cell or using hydrogen directly in the form of hydrogen ICE vehicles, and also in power, including in ammonia seasonal power storage. Currently, most of our hydrogen consumption is about 6.7 million metric ton, and with more than 95% of it being grey hydrogen. And in the industry, oil refining and ammonia for fertilizers is the primary end user, as we see. But as I said, the trend that is expected is that in the future, all of these industrial users moving to green hydrogen, and also transportation use as a fuel in transportation could become more and more prevalent, and also with our, the Satat scheme, green hydrogen production using methane from biomass may also become prevalent. When we look at the potential across the sectors, we do see sectors like oil refining, fertilizers, and chemicals, which are the short and mid-term opportunities. As you can see here, the cost here for all of those is sort of at the medium level, while the size of the sector per se is quite large. And we do see that in the short to mid-term, this is where most of the hydrogen usage will come in. And after that is road transportation, power generation, and buildings. When I'm saying short term, we're talking about more like 2026, 27, and then the mid-term, sort of 2030, 32, where clearly road transportation, which has a large size, and power generation, which has a large size as a market for green hydrogen, will be the next sort of destinations for green hydrogen usage. Of course, there is work that's needed to be done, especially around cost when it comes to use in transportation, whereas for some of the others, some of these cost elements have also been sorted out. And whereas when we talk about shipping fuel, aviation fuel, sort of limited opportunities right now, but does not mean that in the future we will not see application in this. Maybe 2035 onwards, we do see more and more widespread application of green hydrogen in these sectors as well. So then, if this is the potential for decarbonization, then what is it that we need to do in the value chain to unlock this potential? Let us start first with production. We see that drop in solar prices will clearly be the driving force behind green hydrogen cost reduction, and we do see with scale and PLIs these becoming more and more prevalent, and hence the adoption of hydrogen increasing in the future. Scale, for example, if we are able to meet the scale of the Chinese PV manufacturers, the scale that they have today, we would see a lot of drop in prices of the PV modules. We will also see that projects which, for example, in Gujarat, 450,000 acres of land has been earmarked for a solar power project. Those kind of projects will also bring in the necessary scale that is needed. And we will also see that capex for storage would go down as the industrialization of this equipment happens, and also because many of these equipment are also used across other sectors, thereby bringing in additional scale effects. We also see technology and innovation, for example, self-cleaning modules, etc., water conservation techniques and solar parks, which will also reduce, say, the operations and maintenance costs and thereby reducing the tariffs, and also debt servicing costs, especially large conglomerates which have a low debt servicing cost could also play their part in reduction of prices. Looking at electrolyzers, again, yeah, as we learned earlier, yeah, and as Dr. Gupta also said, yeah, it's more like horses for courses. So you have different electrolyzers that could be suited at different applications. We do see that for a distributed footprint, maybe alkaline electrolyzer would be more suited, although it takes up higher space. Also, the cost reduction potential probably today is limited, whereas in case of PEM, yeah, it's highly scalable. The cost reduction potential is also higher, but unless we look at large-scale facilities, probably the balance would tilt in the favor of alkaline for now, and also solid oxide electrolyzer, which is more sort of in the experimentation stage today, probably will have its role to play in the future. We see major Indian companies have already announced plans for green hydrogen and for electrolyzer manufacturing in alignment with the government's vision and the COP26 commitments. For example, Reliance out there has already partnered with companies, whether it's in Germany or in Denmark, and we also see that the L&T has also taken similar steps with some Norwegian companies. Adani Group has also been active in this area. Also, Indian Oil Corporation, which is also thinking of becoming the lowest, green hydrogen, lowest price green hydrogen producer in the world, also through vertical integration. The Gas Authority of India Limited has also taken steps in this regard, and also BPCL, along with the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, is moving in this direction. So we see a large play from a lot of large companies in the country looking seriously at green hydrogen and at electrolyzers. Next step, which is transportation. Here we see, of course, there are three ways of transporting hydrogen. There is the tube trailers, where in the type 1 tube trailers, which turn out to be the most cost effective at about 350 bar pressure, could be used for short to medium distances. Also for transportation of hydrogen when the offtake from the destinations or the retailing stations is still low. These could be a very viable option for the country. Then there is, of course, pipeline, which is still sort of some way away as far as India is concerned, because the dedicated hydrogen pipeline concept will need a lot of work for development and localization, and of course for small distances this will be highly inefficient. Third is the cryogenic tankers, or the liquid hydrogen and transportation, which certainly enables us to transport large quantities and at higher pressures, but for that the offtake at the destination should be equally high as well. So currently that's not the case. Therefore, I would say here again the balance does tilt in the favor of tube trailers for a large distributed footprint, for example, to cater to the transportation sector in the future. Finally, coming to retailing, here we do see that there would be a large drop in the cost of retailing as well, and this is because there are of course the technical factors, whereas the decrease in underground storage due to industrialization of equipment. As I said earlier, also large part of this equipment is also shared, so that's where the low pressure storage part would see cost reductions. As far as the high pressure storage or the cascades are concerned, yes, there would be decrease as the scaling up happens and more of this is deployed. And finally, we also see that subsidies on land and usage of land by existing companies, if they have large land parcels, would also lead to cost reduction as far as retailing is concerned, and this would be of paramount importance, for example, if we have to look at the transportation sector, like heavy trucking shifting to hydrogen using FCVs. Looking at some of the fuel cell use cases, yes, there is a lot of forward compatibility for all vehicle types, whether it's two-wheelers, cars, three-wheelers, LCVs, buses, or trucks. However, we do see that the viability increases when it comes to heavier vehicles, that is the medium and heavy commercial vehicles, wherein hydrogen does provide a lot of range. So the the range anxiety issue that comes with electric is sort of nullified. Also, the weight of the fuel that is to be carried is much lower, as against if transportation was electrified for heavy trucks. Therefore, the payload capacities are not affected, and that could also be a major driver for shift of heavy trucks to the usage of FCEVs. And again, we see that several companies have made progress in this regard, whether it's the homegrown automakers like Tata Motors, or global players like Daimler Trucks, or Toyota, which is also popularizing this in terms of cars, or other companies in the globe like Quantum and SYD Motors that is also looking to venture into hydrogen-based mobility options such as FCEVs. Therefore, finally, in summary, yes, there is a lot of relevance for green hydrogen for the country. As I said, we emitted about 3 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide in 2021, and also our oil imports are increasing. And green hydrogen does form a solution for solving the twin problems of energy security and emissions. The government of India has come up with a draft hydrogen policy, and therefore is serious about implementing this in the country. We are also having talks about becoming leading producers of green hydrogen in the world, and this goes akin with what is happening in many other parts of the globe as well. And the immediate focus, of course, as I said, is going to be around the industrial usage, for example, in refining, for example, in fertilizers, etc. But we do see that there would be more and more widespread usage, and also in other sectors as we unlock the cost reduction potential of green hydrogen, whether it's in the form of production costs through cost reductions in electrolyzers, in renewable energy, or through transportation costs, wherein we look at, for example, hub and spoke models, or usage of lower cost type 1 cylinders carrying type 1 gaskets carrying the SEP 350 bar, and also in the retailing station, where there would be a reduction in cost of equipment on account of scale and on account of technological improvements, and also more and more widespread usage in other industry sectors. Therefore, it certainly seems like green hydrogen has immense potential for unlocking for decarbonizing the economy in India, but there needs to be substantial work done for us to be able to harness this potential by unlocking some of the cost reduction potential out there. With that, I reached the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for a patient hearing.